Now, in our previous lecture, we had talked about Iltutmish and who became the ruler after Iltutmish? Razia Sultan. Her reign lasted for 4 years from 1236 to 1240. Right? Now, what were the circumstances for her accession to the throne? किन circumstances पे रानी बनी? See, Iltutmish had one capable son, Nasiruddin Mahmud. Now, he was an able administrator, he was also a good general, and he was serving in Bengal as the governor of Bengal when he died suddenly in 1229. Right? Now, this created a great crisis. Iltutmish had other sons as well, such as Ruknuddin Firoz, Nasiruddin Mahmud Jr. However, he believed that none of them were capable enough to hold the reins of power, to bring stability to the realm. Therefore, Iltutmish broke the precedent and nominated his daughter Razia as the next Sultan, as his successor. Towards the end of his life, when he was quite ill, Razia also helped him in administering the empire from Delhi. She was also able to cultivate a loyal following among a section of the nobility, a section of the military brass, and the people of Delhi. She was extremely popular among the people of Delhi. However, after the death of Iltutmish, some of the members of the former Turkani-Chihilgani, they were extremely apprehensive of Razia becoming the next Sultan. Why? Because she was of an independent spirit. She was capable enough to survive without their support, and they felt that they are going to be marginalized from the inner power circle. Therefore, after Iltutmish's death, some important nobles chose one of Iltutmish's weak and incapable sons, Ruknuddin Firoz, as the next Sultan above Razia. Okay? Now, Ruknuddin Firoz was a weak, inexperienced and incapable ruler. Therefore, he was easy to control. He would not threaten the power and position of the nobility, and thus he emerged as a puppet ruler. In fact, it was his mother who was acting as the real power behind the throne, in concert with some of the other ambitious nobles. Now, as soon as Ruknuddin Firoz was placed on the throne, the nobles started to embellish and embezzle a lot of the state's money. There was misappropriation of funds. Corruption was in fact encouraged. Because of this, the trust of the people and the general law and order situation began to deteriorate. Right? So a consequence of the accession of Ruknuddin Firoz was unbridled, unchecked corruption, political instability, and a general degradation of law and order. In addition to this, some of the other powerful nobles in the peripheral regions, in the provinces, they thought that this was a good opportunity to break away from Delhi, and they declared independence. Apart from this, some of the Rajput kingdoms which till now had been suppressed, they also felt that this was a good opportunity to assert their independence. So several revolts broke out, and since the central government was a weak and corrupt one, it did not have any means to bring these revolts and the law and order situation under control. So there was a general sense of chaos and helplessness. It was in this scenario that Razia, supported by a section of the nobility and some sections of the military, while enjoying the overwhelming support of the people of Delhi, decided to act. Right? Now, she capitalized upon the unpopularity of Ruknuddin Firoz and his mother Shah Turkan, and thus deposed him. So Razia deposed Ruknuddin Firoz in a popular uprising with the help of the people of Delhi, and declared herself to be the next Sultan. Right? Now, when Razia's popular revolt was going on, some of the older Turkish nobility who were quite ambitious and were threatened by the revival of Razia's power, they took the general environment of chaos as an opportunity and laid siege to Delhi. ठीक है, तो दिल्ली को चारों तरफ से घेर लिया in order to end Razia's rule immediately after she became the Sultan. So some nobles laid siege to Delhi. Did they succeed in their objectives? No, they could not. Razia was able to lift the siege without firing a single arrow, without shedding a single drop of blood. कैसे? तो दिल्ली के अराउंड कई सारे नोबल्स अपनी अपनी फौज लेके खड़े हुए थे, they were ready to give battle to Razia's forces. However, Razia was able to sow the seeds of mutual suspicion and jealousy among them. She started negotiating secretly with different members of the siege layers individually. ठीक है, so these secret negotiations aroused suspicion on the part of their partners, and this is how she used subterfuge and diplomacy to lift the siege without bloodshed. So she did this using subterfuge and diplomacy. ठीक है. Now, once the situation in Delhi had stabilized for the time being, the task of rebuilding was undertaken. Razia took active steps to restore the law and order situation, to contain the corrupt elements, to punish them, to expel them from the inner circle of power. And in order to break the power of the Turkish nobility, she began promoting non-Turkish nobles. ठीक है, to act as a counterbalance against the power of the Turkish nobles. For example, one Abyssinian noble, his name was Yaqut. Earlier he used to be Amir ul Akhrur, that is Lord of the Stables. He was now promoted to the position of Amir ul Umra, that is Lord of the entire nobility. Similarly, Hassan Ghori, he was an Afghan military commander. Before during Iltutmish's reign, he had a relatively lower position within the military hierarchy. Now he was suddenly made the commander-in-chief. At the same time, she also dispatched Hassan Ghori with a large army to subdue the Rajput states, bring them to heel one again. So she also successfully subdued the Rajput rebellions. Okay? So these were the circumstances for the rise of Razia Sultan. Now, what were the reasons why she could not have a long reign? Why was she overthrown within 4 years of gaining power? This is a matter of a little bit of historical debate. Causes for Razia's downfall. Now, what makes Razia unique among powerful medieval Muslim women? क्या यूनिक चीज है उसके बारे में? Yes, she was the first sultan to rule openly. She was the first woman in the Muslim society of medieval India to rule openly, right? So, सामने से she held all the reins of sovereignty and power. There were other prominent Muslim women who also controlled the reins of power, but वो हमेशा पर्दे के पीछे से ऑपरेट करती थी, such as नूरजहां, महामंगा, मुगल period में etc. However, Razia Sultan was the first to rule openly. Now, the earlier historians what do they focus upon primarily? Her gender. ठीक है? For example, the contemporary historian and author Minhaj us Siraj Juzjani, also known simply as Siraj, he was the author of the Tabaqat-e-Nasri. He writes that Razia had all the qualities of a good ruler, but her biggest weakness was her gender, her womanhood. He writes that had she been a man, her reign would have been long and prosperous. It was only because she was a woman that she was not allowed to continue ruling. He further writes that the orthodox ulema and the orthodox Muslim nobility found her rule to be unpalatable, and this was because they felt that it was beneath their dignity to be ruled by a woman. In fact, this section who resented her rule were able to use her gender against her. कैसे? They promoted rumors of her promiscuity and lewd behavior in order to strip away her popularity and make her an unfitting ruler in the eyes of the people. क्या रूमर फैलाया कि रजिया का याकूत के साथ चक्कर चल रहा है, राइट? So this was done in order to erode her legitimacy in the eyes of the people. However, upon closer observation, a different picture emerges. While Razia's gender may have prevented her from stabilizing her rule, it was not the main reason for her downfall. Rather, if we are assigning blame for Razia's downfall, it should be assigned more to the Turkane-Chihelgani and the nature and motivations of the Turkish nobility of Iltutmish's era. ठीक है, Turkane-Chihelgani were essentially an elite group within the Turkish nobility. They had become accustomed to power and prestige. They represented a permanent check on the principle of royal supremacy and they were a prominent side in the struggle for the balance of power which had emerged within the Turkish state in India from the very beginning. So they were a party to the struggle for balance of power between the crown and the aristocracy. Knowing this, tell me whether they would ever want a strong ruler on the throne or not. उनको कभी एक स्ट्रॉन्ग सुल्तान चाहिए होगा या हमेशा वीक सुल्तान ही चाहिए होगा? स्ट्रॉन्ग चाहिए होगा. They would always want a weak sultan so that he could be easily controlled. Now, Razia, although she was a woman, did she ever display any weakness? No, she did not display any weakness. She was unwilling to accept the tutelage of the Turkish nobility. Okay? She was unwilling to accept their influence. Rather, she was actively marginalizing them from playing an active role at Delhi by promoting non-Turkish nobles. तो टर्किश नोबल्स की पावर्स को वो मिनिमाइज डिमिनिश करने की कोशिश कर रही थी. दैट इज द मेन रीजन व्हाई हर रूल वाज नॉट एक्सेप्टेबल टू द नोबिलिटी. ठीक है, सो रजिया as a strong, capable and independent ruler represented a major threat to the ambitions of the Turkane-Chihelgani. And this is the reason that the Turkane-Chihelgani was so strongly opposed to it, opposed to her. Okay? Now, during the reign of Iltutmish, the Turkish nobility had not only been propped up within Delhi, but Turkish nobles had been placed in prominent positions in the peripheral regions, in the provinces, as well as the military. As a result, the Turkish nobles at the center, in the provinces, as well as some prominent Turkish commanders within the military formed a common alliance against Razia. Right? Now, they realized that it would be almost virtually impossible to overthrow Razia if she remains in Delhi, because she enjoys the support of the common people of Delhi. Therefore, they adopted a new strategy. They instigated rebellions in the provinces. Okay? For example, in the Ganga basin they instigated some rebellions. In the region of Punjab they instigated some rebellions. And what did this force Razia to do? In order to maintain the integrity of her empire, she had to move out of Delhi with her army. In fact, her army was split into two so that rebellions in different parts of the empire could be suppressed. Razia was forced to split her army and leave Delhi to suppress these rebellions. And it was away from Delhi that she was the most vulnerable. Finally, she was made a prisoner. She fought certain battles, she was defeated and was captured. She was made a prisoner of the governor of Punjab, Malik Altunia. However, she was able to win the trust and affection of Malik Altunia and ended up marrying him. Right? Now, this once again was a huge cause of alarm for the Turkish nobility. Not only had Razia completely turned the tables on them, now they were being suspicious of the ambitions of each other कि हमको छोड़ के दूसरी पार्टी कौन ज्वाइन कर लेगा. And it was in this confusion that some of the nobles acted against both Razia as well as Malik Altunia. Once again they were defeated, but this time they were put to death. Right? So Razia once again surprised the rebels by marrying one of their leaders. However, in a state of frenzy, some of the nobles acted and Razia was finally imprisoned and executed. ठीक है? So what was the real reason for the downfall of Razia? Was it her gender or was it the nature of the Turkish nobility and their ambitions? No, not gender. वही तो हमने डिस्कस किया है ना कि जो अर्लियर हिस्टोरियंस थे वो बोल रहे थे that gender was the main reason for her downfall, but real factors were the intense competition that existed at the center between the members of the Turkani Chihilgani and the crown, and Razia, being a strong, capable and independent ruler, was posing a permanent threat to the ambition and freedom of the Turkish nobility. Therefore, it was not the gender but the power dynamics at the center which led to her downfall. Take down a question. क्या? हिस्टोरियन तो पहला वाला तो मिनहाज सिराज जुजानी है एंड सेकंड वाले में जो रीसेंट हिस्टोरियोग्राफी है तो उसमें जेएल मेहता, के निजामी, सतीश चंद्र जो लेटर हिस्टोरियंस हैं. ऑल्टरनेटिव एक्सप्लेनेशन में के निजामी, जेएल मेहता, सतीश चंद्र etc. Now take down a question. Razia had all the capabilities of a good ruler. Full stop. Nobles from Deval to Lakhnauti bowed before her. However, her only weakness was her womanhood. Discuss. Now, ये उसी डिबेट के बारे में सवाल है. लेट अस ट्राई एंड आंसर दिस. ठीक है, लिखो. Razia was a unique figure in the history of Islamic rule in India. Full stop. Unlike ambitious Mughal women, such as Noor Jahan, who controlled power from behind the curtain, comma, Razia from behind the curtain, comma, Razia assumed the throne and ruled directly. Full stop. Her reign, R-E-I-G-N, was characterized by an intense struggle against the powerful Turkish nobility, ultimately leading to her downfall. Full stop. Historical opinion is divided on the question of the exact causes of her downfall. Next paragraph. Traditional historiography considers gender to be the biggest factor subpoint. Iltutmish had broken several conventions and the Islamic tradition by nominating Razia, a woman, as his successor. Next point. Minhaj us Siraj Juzjani Minhaj us Siraj Juzjani, the author of the Tabaqat-e-Nasiri, informs us that it was unacceptable for the proud Turkish nobles and the ulema to be ruled by a woman. अगला पॉइंट लिखो. That is why, after Iltutmish's death, his wishes were ignored wishes were ignored, and one of his sons, comma, Ruknuddin Firoz, was placed on the throne. Next point. Siraj attests to the suitability of Razia as a ruler. He states that Razia was intelligent, beautiful, and brave. Full stop. She had a good understanding of administration and military strategy. Good understanding of administration and military strategy. Full stop. She was loved by the people and feared by her enemies. Full stop. Next point. However, her biggest weakness was her gender. Full stop. Next point. In the highly orthodox Muslim society, which was deeply patriarchal, comma, the rule of a woman could never be accepted. Full stop. Next point. This was the biggest factor for the continuous resistance against her, leading to her downfall. A resistance against her, leading to her downfall. ठीक है? नेक्स्ट पैराग्राफ लिखना, नेक्स्ट मेन पैराग्राफ. Recent historiography has reconsidered this question and offered a different explanation. Full stop. Subpoint. According to them, opposition against Razia's rule was not a matter of morality, rather it was the result of material factors. Next subpoint. The members of the Turkane Chihalgani represented the upper crust of the Turkish nobility. Crust of the Turkish nobility. Full stop. They had grown accustomed to exercising great power and were not willing to give it up voluntarily. To give it up voluntarily. Full stop. Next point. Razia was strong, capable, and independent. Full stop. Therefore, she represented a major threat to the ambitions of the nobility. Full stop. Next point. The nobles wanted a weak ruler who could easily be controlled. Full stop. Controlled. Full stop. This, rather than gender, was the real reason why they overlooked Razia in favor of Ruknuddin Firoz. Full stop. The latter was weak and incapable. The latter was weak and incapable. ठीक है? तो real reason ये था rather than gender. Next point. हाँ, recent historiography ये बोलता है that material factors were more important than the question of gender. तो moral reasons से ज़्यादा material factors. What were the material factors? The Turkish nobles wanted to maximize their power. Razia उनको ये नहीं करने दी थी. That is why they did not choose her. They chose Ruknuddin Firoz. Next point लिखो. The competition between the nobility and the crown intensified after Razia became the Sultan. She began marginalizing the old nobility, suppressing their corrupt behavior and balancing their power by promoting non-Turks to high positions. Subpoint: Yakut, an Abyssinian noble. Abyssinia was the old name of Ethiopia, Africa में, ठीक है? An Abyssinian noble was promoted from the position of Amir ul Akhrur. Within brackets you can write Lord of the Stables. रॉयल स्टेबल्स को मेंटेन करने के लिए एक नोबलमैन होता था, आमिर उल अखरूर, दैट वाज हिज टाइटल, ठीक है? लॉर्ड ऑफ द स्टेबल्स टू आमिर उल उमरा, फ्रॉम आमिर उल अखरूर टू आमिर उल उखरा, आमिर उल उमरा. Within brackets you can write Lord of the Nobles. So he was made the first man at the court in Delhi. So मतलब he was the leading nobleman in Delhi, leader of all the nobles. ठीक है? Next point. Similarly, Hasan Ghori, an Afghan commander, was made the commander-in-chief. तो जो पुराने टर्किश नोबल्स थे उनको ये सारी चीजें पसंद आएंगी? नहीं पसंद आएंगी. दैट इज वाई देयर रेजिस्टेंस इंटेंसिफाइड. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो, मेन पॉइंट. The old Turkish nobility began conspiring with the ulema and the Turkish sections of the military along with the provincial nobility against Razia. Against Razia. Full stop. Sub point. They tried to tarnish her image. Tarnish her image. Tarnish. Tarnish. तो reputation के ऊपर दाग लगाना. Tarnish her image by spreading false rumors against her. False rumors against her. Next sub point. Revolts were orchestrated in the provinces, forcing Razia to split her army and leave Delhi. Where support for her was the strongest. For her was the strongest. So inside Delhi she was strong, outside Delhi she was weak. Next point, main point. Ultimately, Razia was defeated, captured, and killed. ठीक है? So this is the alternate explanation. Now conclusion क्या है? Write down. In conclusion, it may be stated that while gender was definitely a factor acting against Razia, it was not the most important factor. It was not the most important factor. Full stop. Rather, the downfall of Razia should be viewed in the context of the internal struggle between the crown and the nobility. Between the crown and the nobility. Full stop. This struggle was a permanent feature of the entire history of the Sultanate period. This struggle was a permanent feature of the entire history of the Sultanate period. Full stop. Apart from Razia, many other sultans also had to face a similar struggle, leading to a state of permanent flux within the empire, flux within the empire. ठीक है? So this is the note on which we can conclude. Razia was unique before because she was a woman, but she was not the only Sultan of Delhi to face a similar challenge from the nobility. The struggle for the balance of power was a permanent fixture of the political equation in Delhi, and therefore the material factors were more important than the question of gender. Okay? Is this clear, online students? Kanishk, Mahboob? हाँ, इससे कम करना पड़ेगा आपको, राइट? तो ये हो गया रजिया सुल्तान का रूल. नेक्स्ट रूलर, यस, we have to talk about Ghiyasuddin Balban. Now, he ruled as a sultan for more than 20 years, from 1266 to 1287, but even before he became sultan, he was acting as the de facto ruler of the Delhi Sultanate by serving as the naib or the prime minister for Nasiruddin Mahmud Shah, who was one of the younger sons of Iltutmish and also the son-in-law of Balban. He served as naib for the entire duration of Nasiruddin Mahmud Shah's reign, from 1246 to 1266. Now, his background is quite interesting. He was not a born member of the Turkish nobility. Rather, Balban was a Mamluk, an ordinary foot soldier. In Iltutmish's army. Right? Now, through his own bravery and administrative capabilities, he was able to gain the attention and praise of the Sultan Iltutmish. During Iltutmish's reign, Balban rose quickly through the ranks and became more and more powerful. Ultimately, he became a leading member of the Turkane-Chihilgani. In fact, he was directly involved in all of the political maneuvering and conspiracy that was going on at Delhi after the death of Iltutmish. So he was a leading figure in the power struggle against Razia Sultan also, right? And in the end, the nobility had emerged victorious with Balban as their leader. Ultimately, in 1246, Balban was able to gather the support of a large section of the Turkish nobility, and together they decided to place one of the younger sons of Iltutmish, Nasiruddin Mahmud Shah, on the throne. Now, Balban further cemented this relationship by having one of his daughters married to Nasiruddin Mahmud Shah, the Sultan. So, Nasiruddin Mahmud Shah was the son-in-law of Balban as well. At the same time, Balban himself became the Naib or Prime Minister. Now, Nasiruddin Mahmud Shah was a puppet ruler. He exercised no real authority. Real power कहाँ पे था? In the hands of the Turkane Chihilgani, led by Balban. So, while serving as Prime Minister, he also emerged as the de facto ruler. In the empire. Now, in this kind of an arrangement, chances क्या है? Is administration going to run well, or is there going to be great deal of corruption? Great deal of corruption, because power is being controlled by a large party of ambitious nobles who all want to maximize their share of power. There is always going to be a lot of infighting, corruption. A patron-client relationship is going to be cultivated by many of the nobles. Power is going to become decentralized. Feudal elements are going to start emerging. This is going to lead to internal weakness. The empire is going to become threatened by both internal as well as external threats. On the external threats, the enemies are going to see this vulnerability and they are going to seek an opportunity to attack. Many of the suppressed people, they are going to rebel. Many of the ambitious nobles whose ambitions are not being fulfilled at the center, they are going to start breaking away. Okay? So, during the reign of Nasiruddin Mahmud Shah, there was large scale corruption, degradation, of the rule of law, a systematic dismantling of the military power of the center, unchecked abuse of power by the nobility, several revolts and rebellions, not only by the ambitious nobles but the ordinary people who were suffering the abuse of power at the hands of the nobility. This was leading to overall weakness and degradation. There was a threat of disintegration. So the empire was on the verge of disintegrating. ठीक है, ऐसे में is there going to be any respect for the position of the crown, for the position of the sultan? उसको रिस्पेक्ट करेगा कोई? नहीं करेगा. He is incapable, unwilling to rule, he is irresolute, he is a puppet ruler, he is not in a position to control the various problems, to address the various problems that the empire is facing. So there was also a complete degradation of the crown's power and authority. People had stopped respecting the crown, they had stopped fearing the crown. ठीक है? And it was in these circumstances that after 20 years of misrule, Nasiruddin Mahmud Shah died under mysterious circumstances in 1266. Now, although it remains unclear as to the actual circumstances of his death, many historians believe कि किसने मरवाया? बलबन ने खुद मरवाया, right? So many believe that he was poisoned by Balban himself, but it easily may have been that one of the rivals of Balban had the Sultan poisoned so that they could place their own contender on the throne, so in order to take power away from Balban. तो ऐसा भी हो सकता है. In any case, with the death of Nasiruddin Mahmud Shah, a crisis emerged within Delhi कि अब नेक्स्ट सुल्तान कौन बनेगा. देयर वॉज नो लेजिटिमेट हेयर टू दी थ्रोन. ठीक है, तो इल्तुतमिश का लाइन अब खत्म हो गया था एंड देयर वॉज नो बडी हु वॉज विद रॉयल ब्लड एंड एट द सेम टाइम acceptable to the major sections of the nobility. So in this scenario, Balban stepped forward and declared himself to be the Sultan. Now, जैसे इल्तुतमिश को रियल फाउंडर ऑफ द दिल्ली सल्तनत बोलते हैं, बलबन इन हिस्ट्री इज रिमेंबर्ड एज द रियल consolidator of Turkish power in India, or consolidator of the Delhi Sultanate. And once again, जैसे हमने इल्तुतमिश के केस में किया था, in order to better understand the achievements of Balban, we must first appreciate the challenges that he faced. And the objectives that he was trying to pursue. ठीक, तो क्या क्या challenges face कर रहा था बलबन? He had inherited a situation of deep crisis. At the political level, the power and prestige of the crown was being constantly eroded by the old Turkish nobility. And the principle of royal supremacy needed to be asserted in order to balance the scales. Further, the various rebellions needed to be suppressed as they threatened the integrity of the empire. At the administrative level, a proper institutional administrative mechanism had to be put in place to replace the Turkane-Cihalgani. At the same time, the law and order situation had to be brought under control. At the ideological level, as an adjunct to the power struggle between the crown and the nobility, the position of the Sultan and Balban's own legitimacy that needed to be secured, right? So Balban needed to come up with a new theory of kingship to redefine the power equation within the Sultanate and at the same time legitimize his as well as the rule of his successors. At the military level, military supremacy of the Sultan had to be restored. So that it could serve as the chief instrument of royal absolutism, despotism. Okay? So he wanted his military to become the biggest factor by which he could control all the rebellions, suppress all the rebellions, restore law and order, keep the nobility in check. So it was supposed to act as the chief instrument of despotism. Balban also felt that the activities of the Chihelgani, which were contributing to frequent rebellions and constantly challenging the position of the crown, could be checked if a proper intelligence infrastructure is put into place. तो जो खुफिया डिपार्टमेंट होता है उसको एस्टैब्लिश करना जरूरी है. तो establishing an intelligence apparatus was one of his other priorities. And finally, having taken care of all these internal issues, it was also important to secure the external frontier. At this point of time, the Sultanate was threatened primarily from the northwest by the Mongols, which threatened the very existence of the Sultanate, the Turkish power in India, and that needed to be contended with. Okay? So these were the challenges and objectives that were faced by Balban when he came to the throne. Now let us see how he responded to these crises. One of the crowning achievements of Balban's rule was the new theory of kingship introduced by him. Its objectives were manifold. Firstly, it was designed to legitimize Balban's rule, since he did not have any direct claim to the throne. He was not a part of Iltutmish's bloodline. He did not have royal blood in him, and that is why an alternate explanation needed to be found. Secondly, he wanted to use his theory of kingship to assert the principle of royal supremacy by suppressing the Turkane Chihelgani. And thirdly, he wanted to introduce a new principle which would ensure dynastic succession. Okay? So these were the objectives on the basis of which the principles of his theory of kingship were designed. Now let us look at the individual principles of his theory of kingship. One of these was the emphasis upon the divine origin of kingship. Balban declared that the office of the Sultan is a gift of God, niyabat ek khudai, and no ordinary person is deserving of this gift. Only exceptional people with exceptional piety, exceptional courage, exceptional intelligence and capability, they are deserving of God's grace in this regard. And thus Balban assumed the title Zilullah, which means shadow of God on earth. At the same time, he also introduced certain Persian court rituals which were designed to enhance the prestige of the crown, such as Sijda, Paibos, the celebration of Nowroz, etc. ठीक है. सिजदा क्या होता है? प्रोस्ट्रेशन बिफोर द किंग. तो सुल्तान को देखो, यू कैन नॉट स्टैंड अपराइट, सबसे पहले जाकर के लेटना होगा उसके सामने, या मार्क ऑफ सप्लिकेशन. पाइबोस टू किस द फीट ऑफ द किंग. एंड इन द फेस्टिवल ऑफ नौरोज, एक पर्शियन फेस्टिवल होता था. दिस वाज द पर्शियन न्यू ईयर, ड्यूरिंग विच द पर्शियन किंग्स वर worshipped almost like gods. So that is exactly what Balban wanted. He wanted to create a direct link between the crown and God. At the same time, Balban was also making certain changes to the code of behavior at the court. ठीक है? So he introduced a new and strict code of conduct at the court. So mood at the court would now be extremely somber and respectful. In the presence of the sultan, कोई भी noble ज़्यादा तेज आवाज में बात नहीं करेगा. There would be no smiling or laughing in the presence of the sultan. That nobody was allowed to sit while in the presence of the sultan. तो जितने भी nobles होंगे वो खड़े रहेंगे. And any violations of this principle would result in severe penalties. ठीक है? And to enforce this strict code of conduct, एक नया officer, master of ceremonies, the Amirul Hijab, he was also appointed. ठीक है? Balban also affected a remarkable change in his own appearance and behavior. इसके पहले, like the regular Turkish nobles, he also used to wear extremely fine clothes, लोगों में mingle करता था, right? He used to participate in social events with them. But now he started to willingly isolate himself from the other Turkish nobles. अब वो सफेद पोशाक पहनने लग गया. That I am not like these other people, I am different. He started living a life of greater seclusion, greater isolation, spending more time with his immediate family rather than the other Turkish nobles. He also stopped drinking alcohol in public. He stopped dining in public. So एक degree of separation बना दिया अपने से बाकी Turkish nobles में, in order to create this sense that the other Turkish nobles are different. I am one step above them, a cut above the rest. ठीक है? ये सारी चीजें करी इसने in order to enforce the principle of the divine rights of kingship or the divine origin of kingship. Secondly, in order to curtail the ambition and power of the Turkish nobility and ensure royal supremacy, he adopted a two-pronged approach towards the nobles. First of all, he adopted the policy of blood and iron towards the nobility. Blood and iron क्या समझ में आता है? ruthless determination towards despotism, that any challenge to the Sultan's authority would be taken as high treason and the violators are going to be perpetrated, are going to be punished accordingly. ठीक है, that is ruthless despotism. बिस्मार्क का भी पॉलिसी ऑफ ब्लड एंड आयरन था, लेकिन वो अलग है थोड़ा, ठीक है. तो दिस इज रूथलेस डिस्पोटिज्म. इसमें क्या होगा, दैट एनी चैलेंज टू द सुल्तान्स अथॉरिटी इज नॉट गोइंग टू बी टॉलरेटेड. इफ एनीबडी रेजेस हिज वॉइस अगेंस्ट द सुल्तान, स्टार्ट्स कंस्पायरिंग अगेंस्ट द सुल्तान, the full force of the law, the military and the entire apparatus of the state is going to be used to suppress them, to silence them, to even charge and convict them, to imprison them, to exile them, or even if that is not possible, to execute them without any just cause, to assassinate them. So this was the policy of blood and iron. ये किसके अगेंस्ट यूज किया जाएगा, अगेंस्ट दी तुर्काने चिहलगानी, in order to eliminate even the slightest possibility of opposition against the Sultan. Now, this policy of ruthless despotism that had to be balanced also. देखो यहाँ पे बलबन के पास ना एक प्रॉब्लम इमर्ज हुआ, that he was not the legitimate heir of Iltutmish. He did not have any royal blood in his veins. Therefore, he was depending upon the support of the other nobles to legitimize him. Other nobles और बलबन में एक common चीज थी, क्या, that both were of Turkish origin. ठीक है, therefore he needed the support of the Turks, but हर Turkish element का support नहीं चाहिए था. He wanted to eliminate the members of the Turkane Chihilgani, but still want to appear as the champion of the Turks. In fact, he linked the Turkish ethnicity with the right to rule. According to him, only pure Turks have the right to rule. Apart from that, nobody else has the right to rule. अब ये बताओ, ये डिस्क्रिमिनेटरी पॉलिसी है या नहीं है? है, केवल टर्क्स के पास ही राइट टू रूल है, अगर कोई टर्किश नहीं है, they don't have the right to rule, right? So he was trying to counterbalance two objectives. At the same time, he tried to appear as the destroyer of the Turkani Chihilgani, but as the champion of the Turks as well. And in this, he tried to legitimize his own position as the leader of the entire Turkish nobility. He was claiming the right to rule as well. So the policy of racism was used by Balban in order to secure the support of the other elements of the Turkish nobility. So after the elimination of the members of the Turkane Chihilgani, some younger Turkish nobles were now elevated to higher positions, or some of those elements which till now were on the margins, they were brought into the center. ठीक है, तो ये two pronged approach इसने अप्लाई किया towards the nobility. Further, now his policy was characterized by an intense level of despotism and militarism. ठीक है, अब ऐसे में how is the rule going to appear to be? बेनिफिशिएंट रूल होगा, म्यूनिफिशिएंट रूल होगा, या फिर डिस्पोटिक लगेगा, टिरानिकल लगेगा, डिस्पोटिक टिरानिकल लगेगा. And this is going to reduce his popularity, right? In order to make his rule appear popular, Balban introduced the concept of, or policy of, kingship knows no kinship. This refers to the principle of impartial justice. That yes, the rule of Balban may have been harsh, but it was extremely fair. ठीक है, यहाँ पे justice is going to be the first and only priority, and justice is going to be available to all the subjects of the Sultan, irrespective of their status, irrespective of their background, their religion, their birth. Even if he is a member of the Sultan's immediate family, he is a kinsman of the Sultan is going to be completely impartial towards them in matters of justice. In fact, Balban demonstrated this in a very public manner also. He publicly punished and even exiled some members of the provincial Turkish nobility, some of the members of the Turkani-Chihilgani for mistreating their slaves. So slaves were the lowest of the low, लेकिन उनको बचाने के लिए even the highest people, the most influential people of the realm had been punished. This was the principle of impartial justice. Further, Balban also wanted to ensure डायनास्टिक सक्सेशन. ठीक है, तो लेजिटिमेसी तो इसने सिक्योर कर लिया थ्रू द डिवाइन राइट्स ऑफ किंगशिप एंड थ्रू द प्रिंसिपल ऑफ इम्पार्शियल जस्टिस. नाउ हाउ टू इंश्योर डायनास्टिक सक्सेशन? बल्बन क्लेम्ड mythical origin of his bloodline, right? तो एंशिएंट पीरियड में हमने देखा था कि जो पुराने राजा होते थे, दे यूज टू हैव देयर ब्लड लाइन्स लिंक्ड टू द एंशिएंट डायनेस्टीज ब्लड लाइन्स थ्रू द पुराण्स. They even had their bloodlines linked to the bloodlines of various gods and goddesses. Same thing was done by Balban also. He claimed that he was the successor of a mythical Persian hero, Afrasiab. So he was a mythical Persian hero with almost god-like powers. Now this was used by him not only to legitimize his own position but also to legitimize the position of any possible successors. ठीक है, so after him his successors would also have the same right to rule because they also share the bloodline of Afrasiab. At the same time, Balban's sons and grandsons were brought up as princes. They were given administrative training, they were given the highest level of education, and they were prepared for rule. They were publicly presented, they were put in positions of prominence while Balban was still alive. One of his sons, Bughra Khan, was the governor of Bengal, for example. ठीक है, and जो उसके grandsons थे, he named them after great Persian and Turkish sultans. तो पर्जिया में ख्वारिज़म एंड ये क्या बोलते हैं, टर्की में Turkish sultanates had been established. So in order to have a greater association with royal power, he gave his grandsons royal names such as Kai Khusro, Kaikubat. So royal names etc. were given to the grandsons of Balban. ठीक है, तो ये हो गया his theory of kingship. Now apart from this, Balban also undertook some other measures to restore normalcy within the Sultanate, to consolidate his power. क्या क्या किया इसने और इसके अलावा? For example, he undertook important administrative reforms. The Turkani-Chihilgani was dismantled, its power was dissolved, and it was replaced by the Diwan system, also known as the portfolio system of government, where the administrative responsibilities at the center were divided up between separate departments. Balban established how many diwans? 4 diwans. कौन से? दीवाने विजारत, दीवाने अर्ज, दीवाने इंशा एंड दीवाने रसालत. ये हमने पहले भी कवर किया है. दीवाने विजारत रेवेन्यू डिपार्टमेंट, दीवाने अर्ज मिलिट्री डिपार्टमेंट, दीवाने इंशा डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ रॉयल कॉरेस्पॉन्डेंस मेंटेनिंग रिकॉर्ड्स, दीवाने रसालत डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ रिलीजियस अपील्स एंड फॉरेन अफेयर्स. राइट. तो एक तो इसने ये और काम किया. Now this gave a degree of permanence to the Delhi Sultanate which it had been lacking, and this was probably one of the longest lasting contributions of Balban, because this Diwan system was continued not only throughout the rest of the Sultanate period, it was also adopted by the Mughals. ठीक है. तो एक ये और contribution हुआ. Apart from this, certain military reforms were also introduced. What did Balban do? In order to introduce the element of royal supremacy, he was the first sultan to introduce a permanent standing army, paid for and equipped directly by the center, being commanded by royally appointed officials and under the supreme command of the sultan directly. Okay. The administrative functions within the army were controlled through the newly established दीवाने अर्ज. However, supreme command was in the hands of the Sultan himself. ठीक है. Now it was his military which became the chief instrument of his despotism as well, right? So Balban adopted a very harsh stance against the rebels, policy of blood and iron, and without a strong military it was not possible to do so. So he adopted a policy of terror against rebels. So as per his theory of kingship, he was the shadow of God on earth, the living embodiment of God's will on earth. Any challenge to his authority was a challenge to the authority of God himself, and those who oppose the will of God, उनके against कोई tolerance नहीं. And therefore, using his strong military, he made an example out of rebels such as the Rajputs of Mewat and Bughra Khan, who was formerly the governor of Bengal, but after the death of Nasiruddin Shah, sensing weakness at the center, he had declared independence and was now in a state of open rebellion. So Bughra Khan came against the same policy of terror. There was large-scale organized massacre in both regions. The ruling families in both cases were put to death. जो unlawful elements थे, they were also brought under control, and many of the men were put to death. Women and children were enslaved in both cases, right? तो ये policy of terror अपनाया इसने. This was part of his policy of blood and iron. To secure Delhi against the Mongol threat, he adopted a posture of active defense. What did this involve? It involved placing spies in the Mongol courts. ठीक है? तो espionage was used to keep an eye on the activities of the Mongols, and at the same time two lines of defense were erected to protect Delhi from any Mongol invasion by erecting two lines of fortifications in the region of Punjab. So if this is Delhi, Mongol invasion यहाँ से आएगा, it will get trapped in between these two lines. ठीक है? लाहौर, मुल्तान एंड दीपलपुर, सुनाम, समाना एंड भटिंडा, ये 6 फोर्ट्स बनाए गए, एंड दीज फोर्ट्स वर परमानेंटली गैरिसन्ड. तो यहाँ पे हमेशा लोग रहते थे, सोल्जर्स रहते थे, एंड एट ऑल टाइम्स these soldiers would patrol this entire line. The lookouts and scouts would be placed in forward positions to give forewarning of any Mongol invasion. ठीक है? तो Mongol threat को चेक करने के लिए ये strategy अपनाया गया. Further, for suppressing the possibility of future rebellions by the Rajputs, the use of Afghan mercenaries was becoming more and more popular. तो यहाँ पे किया क्या गया? That in the problematic regions, all the old Rajput forts were captured, many of them were destroyed, but some of them were also restored, and in place of giving it back to the Rajputs, Afghans were given control of this. They were also given land in the surrounding region, right? So idea क्या था? That the Afghans would counterbalance the power of the Rajputs. Now the Turks did not want either the Rajputs or the Afghans to become too strong, but with the Turkish invasion and success in India, कई सारे Afghans आने लग गए थे हिंदुस्तान में. They represented a possible threat, so give them land in the periphery so that Rajput power could be controlled. So many of the old forts were repaired and Afghan troops were placed. Afghans were also granted land to keep them away from the power center as well as contain the revival of the Rajputs. ये एक strategy अपनाया गया. Balban also believed in the merits of having a good intelligence apparatus, and therefore he introduced a system of military intelligence. With spies known as Barids sending regular reports to the center regarding troop movements and planning of the enemy. Military intelligence officials were also sent to the courts of provincial nobles in order to keep an eye on them. However, this was not a separate department. It was part of the military department. The senior most intelligence officer within the military was known as the Barid A. Mumalik. Now, his rank was the same as the rank of the Amir-e Mumalik, Ariz-e Mumalik, who was the head of the military department, the Diwan-e-Arz, and he was in a position to report directly to the Sultan. ठीक है, तो ये इसके अलावा और चेंजेस किए बलबन ने apart from the theory of kingship. Now let us look at the impact of Balban's response or its critical evaluation. An analysis of the successes and failures of Balban's policies. Now, if we were to evaluate the response of Balban in the immediate sense, it was highly successful. क्यों? Because it was able to solve the biggest concerns that the empire was facing at this point of time. जैसे कि the power and prestige of the crown and the principle of royal supremacy was definitely restored. The Turkan-e-Chihilgani was eliminated, and this ad hoc administrative mechanism was replaced by proper institutions in the form of the Diwan system, which gave a great deal of permanence to the Sultanate administration. Further, the reorganization of the military and establishment of a strong standing army introduced or restored the principle of military supremacy, leading to a long period of political and economic stability. Balban's strong policy of active defense was much more effective in containing the Mongol threat as compared to the earlier meek policy of appeasement or aloofness. Okay? So, Mongol threat was contained more effectively. Further, Balban's strong attitude of blood and iron towards the rebels also prevented any future rebellions against him. Resulting in greater political and economic stability. His introduction of a spy system became a major instrument to ensure royal supremacy, once again enhancing stability, improving the ability of the Sultan to prevent external invasions and internal rebellions. Balban's theory of kingship is a remarkable innovation in itself. It introduced a new spirit to the institution of kingship, resulting in a new balance of power between the crown and the other elements. So, in its immediate objectives, Balban's reforms were quite successful, were greatly successful. However, it also suffered from some serious limitations. किस तरह के limitations? First of all, Balban's theory and his rule was characterized by extreme ruthlessness and despotism, making it highly popular or unpopular? Unpopular. Okay? People did not like the high-handed attitude of the Sultan, and this unpopularity, not only among the common population but also the powerful elements of the Turkish nobility, led to its impermanence, right? So as soon as Balban died, he expected that his sons are also going to rule in the same manner, that his sons and grandsons are also going to receive the same level of respect. However, this was not the case. Their unpopularity led to a reaction from all sectors, including the high-born as well as the low-born. Both the Turkish as well as non-Turkish elements were dissatisfied. Why were the Turkish elements dissatisfied? Because of the policy of blood and iron being pursued against them. Non-Turkish elements were dissatisfied because of their non-inclusion in the power center, right? The policy of racism had narrowed the social base, and this reaction from all sectors led to the failure of Balban's desire to ensure dynastic succession. So dynastic succession failed. Within 3 years of Balban's death, his dynasty had been uprooted. The policy of tertial racist exclusivism had also diminished the social base of the empire. Power was exclusively in the hands of a very small, microscopic cross section of the Turkish nobles. There were other ambitious groups as well. They were not deriving any benefit. At the same time, the excessive focus on militarism and the large scale spending on the military expansion had led to the strengthening of military commanders. So military commanders emerged as major power brokers, right? And now in the future, sultans will have to manage not only the ambitious ulema and the nobility, but also powerful military commanders. Right? In fact, Jalaluddin Khilji, the founder of the Khilji dynasty and the person who organized the rebellion, the Khilji revolution, the rebellion against the Ilbaris, was himself a prominent military commander only. Okay? So military became extremely powerful. So while in the immediate sense, Balban's response had resulted in stability, in the longer term, it resulted in instability. It resulted in the failure of the desire to ensure dynastic succession. It created a new power imbalance within the Delhi Sultanate by making the military commanders extremely powerful. His policy of racial exclusivism diminished the social base of the empire, thus securing reaction and resistance from almost every sector within the Islamic population in India. Okay? So these were his limitations. On the whole, क्या बोल सकते हैं हम बलबन्स थ्योरी ऑफ किंगशिप के बारे में या बलबन्स रिस्पॉन्स के बारे में? That while it suffered from these limitations, had it not been for Balban, had it not been for Balban's consolidation, किस चीज का डेंजर था? The Delhi Sultanate itself may have disintegrated, right? तो शुरुआत में तो यही डेंजर था ना सबसे बड़ा, कि बिखरने वाला था पूरा एम्पायर. The Delhi Sultanate may have disintegrated. Had it not been for Balban, the process of political fragmentation and infighting would have continued without being stopped, and political unity would have disappeared. Further, had it not been for Balban, there would have been no one to assert the principle of royal supremacy and keep the ambitious Turkish nobility in check. Thus, had it not been for Balban, जैसा राजपूत पीरियड में फ्यूडलिज्म हुआ था वैसा अभी यहाँ पे रिवाइव हो सकता था. The institution of feudalism would have strongly revived and royal supremacy would have disappeared. Had it not been for Balban and the political stability that he was able to provide, economic revival नहीं हो पाता, right? Economic revival would not have taken place, and had there been no economic revival, the financial position of the empire would be extremely weak. Finances would have remained weak had it not been for the strong finances which emerged under Balban. It would have been impossible for the Sultan to raise a permanent army, a strong permanent army. Military reforms would not have taken place, military strengthening would not have taken place. Had it not been for Balban, the empire would have continued to lack administrative permanence, since there would have been nobody to introduce the Diwan system of government. There would have been no administrative institutionalization. तो हम बलबन को बड़ी आसानी से क्रिटिसाइज तो कर सकते हैं दैट he was not able to provide or ensure dynastic succession. His rule diminished or reduced the social base of the empire, thus affecting the longevity of his dynasty. It created an adverse reaction from every section of the population, thus weakening the chances for the success of his successors. But on the other hand, had it not been for Balban, the necessary economic, military and administrative strength and stability that was required for the imperialism witnessed during Khilji's period, वो कभी foundation create हो पाता? नहीं हो पाता, right? So, had it not been for Balban, in other words, the aggressive imperialism and ambitious policies of the Khilji period would not have been possible without Balban and his reforms. ठीक है, so ये हो गया एक critical evaluation of Balban's policies. Take down a question. Was it not for Balban, Khilji imperialism would have remained an unattainable dream? Discuss. (150 words, 10 marks. Now, although you can attempt this question even now, एक बार ये खिलजी imperialism वाला topic हो जाएगा ना, then you will be able to write a better answer. The essence of this question is कि अगर बलबन नहीं होता, the platform which was necessary for the rapid territorial expansion witnessed during Alauddin Khilji's reign, that would not have been possible, because Balban was the one who created the platform for these victories. ठीक है, so that is what we need to discuss. Another question, लिखो. Balban's theory of kingship was a new experiment in the power dynamics of the Sultanate. Full stop. However, its real test was in its execution. Full stop. Discuss. $200 words, 15 marks. देखो, what were the objectives of Balban's theory of kingship? क्या क्या था? To legitimize his rule, to legitimize his succession. Secondly, to ensure royal absolutism, royal supremacy, and thirdly, to ensure dynastic succession. ठीक है? तो ये तीन ऑब्जेक्टिव के साथ एक नया एक्सपेरिमेंट किया बलबन ने टू रिजॉल्व और टू ऑल्टर द पावर डायनामिक्स ऑफ द सल्तनत. अब what do we mean when we say power dynamics? The balance of power, and उसके लिए जो struggle था between the king and the nobility, between the crown and the Turkane Chihelgani, right? So it was essentially Balban's attempt to provide the ideological basis to assert royal supremacy and tilt the balance of power in his own favor. So in accordance with these objectives, a number of principles were introduced, such as the principle of divine origin of kingship, the principle of policy of blood and iron, policy of racism, policy of this thing, kingship knows no kinship. To ensure dynastic succession, he claimed mythical origin, right? ये सारे principles इसने use किए. अब रियल टेस्ट क्या आता है कि केवल किताब में लिख दिया बर्नी ने बाद में, is that enough to ensure success, or will Balban have to transmit this theory into actual policy? उसके ट्रांसमिशन में रियल टेस्ट आएगा. So the material changes that Balban undertook in accordance with the theory of kingship and the degree of success over there, that was the real test. So we need to discuss not only the principles of the theory of kingship, but how Balban implemented these principles. So if we are talking about the policy of blood and iron, the policy of ruthless despotism, policy of racial exclusivism, how were these implemented? That is what we need to discuss. And finally last portion में क्या करेंगे? Since ये टेस्ट है तो इसका रिजल्ट भी हमको बताना पड़ेगा, राइट? तो इन द कंक्लूजन वी आर गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट द क्रिटिकल इवैल्यूएशन की हाँ कहीं कहीं पे गलतियां हुई, देयर वर सम लिमिटेशंस, but the importance of Balban's theory of kingship cannot be denied. It was this theory of kingship which prepared the platform for the heady days of Khilji absolutism and imperialism. Balban emerged as the real consolidator of the Delhi Sultanate primarily because of this new theory of kingship and his ability to successfully implement its principles. ठीक है? That is what we need to do. So I am ending this class right now. कोई doubts हो तो please let me know. इसमें पहले आप प्रिंसिपल्स बताओगे, फिर उसके बाद आपको बताना है कि किस तरह से उसको इम्प्लीमेंट किया गया. डिफाइन नहीं करने की जरूरत है. यू नीड टू टॉक अबाउट द इंपॉर्टेंट प्रिंसिपल्स. पहले ऑब्जेक्टिव बताओगे, फिर उसके प्रिंसिपल्स बताओगे, एंड देन यू आर गोइंग टू टेल हाउ दीज प्रिंसिपल्स वर इम्प्लीमेंटेड इन रियलिटी. फॉर एग्जाम्पल पॉलिसी ऑफ रूथलेस डिस्पोटिज्म, उसको इंप्लीमेंट करने के लिए चीफ इंस्ट्रूमेंट क्या ढूंढा बलबन ने? हिज मिलिट्री. तो मिलिट्री रिफॉर्म्स करके उसने पॉलिसी ऑफ ब्लड एंड आयरन को परस्यू किया. टू कंटेन rebellions, to prevent the possibility of foreign invasions, he introduced an entirely new intelligence system, बारिद सिस्टम, बारिद मुमालिक उसने इंट्रोड्यूस किया. तो कैसे उसने अपनी थ्योरी को एक्चुअल शेप दिया, दैट इज व्हाट वी नीड टू डिस्कस। सब आएगा, सब कुछ आएगा उसमें, उसी में आपको इनकॉर्पोरेट करना है, ठीक है। एंड फाइनली आपको ये बताना है कि कितना सक्सेसफुल था कितना नहीं था, ठीक। और कुछ नहीं? महबूब, एनीथिंग एल्स? नो? चलिए देन, थैंक यू फॉर योर टाइम, सी यू टुमारो।